Welcome to Washington Policy on the Go. This is kind of a special edition. Usually we do it every other week. We did one last week. We'll be doing one next week. But because Todd Myers, my good friend, and the Center for the Environment Director here at Washington Policy Center, his brand new book, Time to Think Small, is out. I thought we'd do a special, very good shameless plug there, holding up the book from Todd. His book launch was last week, very successful book launch. It's doing very well on Amazon, and it's been very exciting to watch here at Washington Policy Center. We want to give you a chance to get on board and ask questions of Todd about that new book. And of course, the obligatory find out how you can buy it for all your friends and family members, especially the woke generation that might be in college that are hyper concerned about the environment, but they've been fed a line about the best way to do that. I should start, Todd, with a question for you, which is, I loved Eco-Fads, your first book, and I'm just wondering, what was the inspiration? What was the moment when you thought to yourself, I got to write a book on this time to think small, on the small ways to improve the environment?
Well, yeah. So my first book, Eco-Fads, was about what's wrong with our environmental policy, how we make decisions. And basically the argument is that we make a lot of our environmental policy is made to make politicians look good and feel good, not actually to create good outcomes for the environment. And given a choice between something that rewards political allies and makes them popular and something more mundane that is much more effective, they will choose the thing that rewards political allies. And the best example of that, I don't know the best example, but a example of that this year is the bill that was passed in Congress, that is the big climate bill. But for every dollar that goes to support renewable energy, $5 goes to unions if that project is built with unions. So that gives you a sense of where their priorities are. Their priorities more about political allies than actually achieving the goal that they say is an existential crisis. So having written that book a decade ago and still seeing examples of that every day, the question is, how do we get away from that? How do we get our environmental policy so that it is focused on results and doing good things rather than just sort of salving the conscience of politicians? And the answer that I started to see everywhere was that thanks to technology, thanks to small technologies, people and groups are now doing things that they never could have done just 15 years ago to help the environment, that are more effective, that are innovative, that are adaptable to all sorts of places all over the world, and respect individual freedom and prosperity in a way that a lot of government programs simply don't. And so that's what I wrote, is about how bottom-up solutions using technology, focusing on innovation, are not only more respectful of market values and the values that people on the right have, but they're more effective for the environment. And so that's what made me want to write this book.
One of the things that you frequently talk about or mention when you're setting up a statement or speech or an op-ed on this topic, I've noted, is that conservatives care about the environment, but we're often perceived as not having a policy. That there is, that there's just nothing there. So people looking for some kind of environmental improvement feel like there's only one option on the table, and that's the radical left's option of mandates and top downs. And so you're providing this this alternative, but it harkens to one of the frustrations I've had in watching your work over the years, which is you'll point out something, the passion that comes from people is that it's an expensive solution. It's something that is going to cost a lot of money and achieve little benefit. Right. So, let's just use the upcoming projected 46 cents per gallon, gas hike on because of the cap and trade program. Tax. I mean, that's really how it functions here in Washington State. Here we've got this big new projected increase in gas prices. And, the thing that strikes everybody is how much is it going to cost them? And that's understandable. And that's what gets me angry. But there's a secondary cost, too, which is there are other ways and more efficient ways that you've pointed out how to achieve big results for environmental improvement. And we don't do them. We don't follow the science as a state, and say, how do we get the biggest bang for our buck, the most efficient results given the limited resources we have? Instead, we kind of go for the big ones. Why do you think that continues? And, how do you think that the explosion of technology and the ability of people to act as individuals is going to change that over time?
So there's a couple of things there. One is about conservatives and folks on the right who don't engage on the environment and are skeptical of it. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is because a lot of times we feel that environmental policies are simply Trojan horses for socialism. And you know what? In a lot of cases, we're right. And the left openly says that a lot of the things that they want to do are part of transforming society. I remember, and I actually have a quote in my book, Ecofads, from one environmental activist who said, our goal is to transform the economy of the entire globe, which I mean is just ridiculous. But I mean, she actually believed that that was the goal. And so naturally, we recoil at that sort of thing, but we recoil not just at the solution, but at the issue of the environment altogether, because we believe that it is simply a conduit for those sorts of really bad ideas. But if you look at a map at where people live, right, conservatives live near nature, near natural resources, whereas the left tend to live in cities where we've paved it over. So that, I think, is one big reason why conservatives recoil. So how do we deal with that? And the way we deal with that is that we have the courage of our own convictions. We recognize that free markets and free choice and incentives are better in all sorts of other areas. Economic development, right? School choice, we recognize that it produces better schooling. All sorts of other areas, we recognize that those values and those principles do a better job, but we just haven't seen that in the environment, or haven't recognized how we can apply it effectively. And that's what my book is about, is giving lots and lots of examples of how to apply those using technology to show that they are more effective and that they are doing great things around the world, not just on energy, but on ocean plastic, on providing access to water, on protecting species. All of these things are happening and having a really big impact in places that government is simply failing.
Tell us about, well, first I should remind people, if you have a question for Todd, just put it in the Q&A function there at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. It might be on the side, depending on how you got things set up, but the Q&A function works the best. If you have to chat it, that'll be fine as well. We'll try and get to those. But at any time, we'll make sure Todd gets those questions. Tell us, Todd, about the foreword was of your book this time was written by the Wild Labs research lead at the World Wildlife Fund. Tell us about the significance of the individual doing that, Talia, who did this foreword, and what it meant to you, and what do you think it means to your book in terms of positioning and being able to share the ideas more widely.
So the foreword was written by a woman named Talia Speaker. She is the sort of innovation lead at Wild Labs. Wild Labs is an international organization that works with environmental groups all over the world and helping them apply conservation technologies to solve the problems that they face. And the beauty of that is that it's adaptable, right? The technology is different everywhere, but they help that. Well, Wild Labs is part of WWF, which is not a center-right organization. And yet, Wild Labs is one of the top groups in the world promoting conservation technology using these sorts of solutions, which work with people on the ground. It's not government-based. It is work with people on the ground who have incentives and the knowledge to do right things, and helping them use those sorts of things to protect the environment. So that is really exciting to me, because what it says is that not only are these ideas appealing to people like us who care about markets, who care about individual liberty and personal incentives and responsibility, but it's also appealing to people on the left who are frustrated that we are not solving many of these problems. And so, every Thanksgiving, we're coming up in Thanksgiving, every Thanksgiving, there are all these articles about at helping 20-somethings and college students talk to their, conservative uncle about climate change. Basically, people like me is who they're trying to talk to. But this is a book that you can use to talk to them or give to them and say, but those ideas don't work. right? We're not solving climate change. This week we have a UN conference in Egypt. Well, guess what? They've had all these conferences and it's not getting any better. Maybe we should try things that work. These are things that work, not just for climate change, but for a lot of other issues. So that's the approach that I want to take. And that's why I'm so excited about having somebody like Talia write the foreword, because it shows that this crosses ideological lines and is for people who really care about environmental results, not environmental politics.
Imagine all the money and carbon emissions they could save just sending your book out to each of the participants at the big conference. I mean, they'd miss out on the luxury hotels and all that, but they would get better ideas. We got a question from Rachel who asks, can you please elaborate on the small solutions around garbage and plastics?
Yeah, this is a great issue. This is actually one of the best examples. So I will talk about sort of ocean plastic in particular. There's concerns about plastic garbage, which I talk about in the book. One of the biggest concerns, and the reason that we banned plastic bags in Washington State, is because we're worried about plastic getting into the water and the impact that it has on marine mammals and marine life and things like that. And it is a real problem. There's a lot of plastic that is going into the ocean. That's bad because it doesn't photodegrade very rapidly. It doesn't biodegrade, so it sticks around. So the question is, how do you deal with that? Well, we could ban plastic bags, but Washington State is not the problem. The United States is not the problem. Sri Lanka puts about 5 times as much plastic into the ocean as all of the United States combined. So banning plastic bags basically does nothing. Where you have to solve the problem is in developing countries. So a group called Plastic Bank went to some of those countries, the Philippines, Indonesia, Brazil, Egypt, and paid people to pick up plastic on the beaches. And all they needed was a cell phone, because then they could geolocate, okay, here's where I picked up the plastic. They turned it into Plastic Bank, where they have these locations where they can collect the plastic. They were paid on their cell phone because many of these people simply don't have bank accounts. So their smartphone became the way that they got paid. And then Plastic Bank took the plastic that they collected and sold it to SC Johnson. So when you go to the store and you see a Windex bottle, it'll say made with ocean-bound plastic. And if you're curious, okay, is this real, right? Is Windex actually, is SC Johnson really doing this? Plastic Bank has a webpage where you can go and see where the plastic that they picked up was. So it's also very transparent. Now, none of this is very complicated technology. It's basically smartphones. 93% of people in developing countries have smartphones, and an online system that shows where the plastic was collected. Through this system, they have collected more than 3 billion plastic bottles that would have washed into the ocean and 140 million pounds of plastic. And so this very simple small ball approach, going to where the problem is, because the technology is so adaptable, is tremendously powerful. And I'll just give you one last quick example for contrast. There's a group that is trying to clean up the Great Garbage Patch in the Pacific Ocean. They have these big boats. They also have these collectors in rivers to collect trash and things like that. And it's called the world's largest ocean cleanup. They have collected about 3 million pounds of ocean plastic. So compare 3 million for the world's largest ocean to 140 million pounds just from using small technologies to have people pick up plastic. People have a sense that you need to do big things and big efforts to solve big problems. But what my book shows again and again is that the aggregate benefit of small projects add up to much more than a lot of the big things we think we have to do.
By the way, I think that's an interpretive key to life these days. I'm waxing philosophic here, but what I noticed is when my bank account dwindles over the month, it's the little things that get you. It's not the big things. And life is lived in the moments. The best memories you have with the people you love are those little moments that you have in the day-to-day kind of thing, not usually the big things. So you're onto something there. It's not philosophically, Todd. Another question here from Steve. Todd, the LCFS and CAP legislation appear to be the worst of all approaches. They raise the cost of everyone's energy, but do not improve the environment, nor provide resources to the state for projects. Is this the reality? Thank you.
Well, the LCFS, which is called the Low Carbon Fuel Standard, which basically mandates a certain percentage of biofuels or electrical generation or electrical charging for cars, that is true. It raises no money for the state. And because it duplicates a lot of other rules, it doesn't add anything to total CO2 emissions. Basically, it's a payoff primarily for the people who lobbied for it, which not surprisingly are biofuel companies. So it adds costs, but doesn't add any benefits. The cap and trade system is a little different. The cap and trade system does raise money for the state. In fact, much more money than they anticipated because the costs are so high, right? That's why it's going to be 46 cents a gallon, because the rules are even more restrictive than they anticipated. That money goes in to the general fund for the state. The problem with it is there are basically no guidelines for how they can use that. They have some general guidelines, but there's nothing that says that the state has to spend those in a way that is effective in reducing CO2 emissions or mitigating the impacts of climate change. They can justify, because the rules are very vague, they can justify all sorts of things. But the biggest problem is that they have this cap goal where we have to reduce our CO2 emissions by 50% by 2030. That's why the prices skyrocket so much, because the cap that they have set is so restrictive. And anytime you see something that is divisible by 5, right, by 50% by 2030, it is not a scientific goal. It is not a goal that was set based on can we achieve it economically. It is a goal set by politicians who want to say 50% by 2030. That's a really bad way of setting goals and policies. And the beauty about bottom-up approaches that give people power is it allows them to weigh the trade-offs. If they use, resources, they have to pay for those resources, but they have an incentive not to. And by giving people the tools to do more with less, to use less electricity, to use electricity when it's not carbon intensive, that when it's more renewable, those are better ways to do it that don't have these astronomical costs.
The book is Time to Think Small. Todd Myers' new book. It launched last week. It's wherever books are sold on Amazon. It's probably the easiest way for you to get it. I think you can get it through the WPC webpage, right? Todd, do we still have that link up from your launch?
You can, or you can just get it at Amazon and they will ship it to you. Yes.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. Let's see. This next question from Conrad Lee. Please speak to the AI application in reducing traffic congestion.
Well, I will give you one example. AI is doing all sorts of things like synchronizing lights and things like that, but I'll give you a really cool example. There's a company in Canada called Pantonium. And so a lot of the focus, when you hear talk about transportation and reducing energy, it is all on transit. But the problem with transit is that sometimes it doesn't go where people want, it's inflexible, other things like that. So what Pantonium has done is what they call on-demand macro transit. And that simply means that it's like Uber. You say, okay, here's where I am, here's where I want to go, and I need to be there by this time. And the system figure out, okay, we have a bus, and it routes it on the fly. So it says, okay, I need to pick up people here, 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 and here, and go to these stops. And what the amazing thing about that is twofold. One, it gets people, it's flexible. People can choose when they want to go and when they want to arrive, and it gets them there on those times, which is not always the case with transit, right? On a fixed route, it's dynamic. And the second thing is, because it's dynamic, it doesn't go to a bunch of stops where there's no people. So if the route would say, oh, you need to go all through this whole area, but then the system says, no, there's no people there, it cuts that off and goes to a shorter route. So it gets people there faster, right? They don't have to go that long route, and they use less gasoline. So what Pantonium has found in the cities where it has applied this, in Canada and then places like Sioux Falls, South Dakota, is that not only are riders happier, they use less gasoline. And ridership in one city, a suburban area of Toronto, ridership increased 300%. Because now people knew that they could rely on it and get where they needed to go. And even though it increased 300%, it still used less gasoline. So it saved money. More riders, less gasoline, better for the environment, better for consumers. That's one way AI is being applied to reduce gas use and provide more service.
Next question here is from Todd. Electric vehicles are being mandated in Washington State. Can you comment on this top-down approach from Governor Inslee and compare it to a market-based approach to lowering motor vehicle emissions?
Yeah, so there was a poll recently that said that large majorities in Washington State don't like the mandate, don't support mandating electric vehicles. And there was a very funny quote from the governor's spokesman, Mike Falk, where he said, "We believe it will be more popular in the future." Well, if it's more popular in the future, you don't have to mandate it. The only reason you mandate it is because you know it's not going to be popular and you want to force people to do what they wouldn't otherwise do. So that's why you have the mandate. But Washington State, starting next year, will have a cap. And that cap is a cap on how much CO2 can be emitted each year. And that covers gasoline and other motor fuels. So we already have a rule that does this. I have lots of problems with that cap. I've already talked about that it's too strict. But one of the benefits of cap and trade is that it is a single system that provides a clear incentive and a clear price incentive for people to reduce how much CO2 they emit. You don't need all these ad hoc rules about subsidies here and mandates here. And right, we just passed a requirement that new buildings basically can't use natural gas. Cap and trade is supposed to replace all of those things, all of those very costly and difficult ad hoc regulations. But politicians are now addicted to climate policy. And so what they do is that they mandate things even when it's unnecessary. And all that simply does is says, yes, I know you have to meet this rule already, but we want you to meet it in this very particular and expensive way. It's like, okay, that's fine, but that has nothing to do with the environment because you're not actually helping the environment. All you're doing is mandating that people do it in the way that you want for whatever reason, because it makes you feel good, because it benefits a particular special interest. So that's the problem with the way our politics are. And if you give people clear incentives and choices, they can meet those targets, but in a way that is best to them. And that respects not only their freedom, but it often ends up being less expensive.
As you were talking there, Todd, I was thinking that we need to have some kind of campaign to make sure your book gets in the hands of Greta Thunberg so that she can have a Merry Christmas this year. I feel like the poor kid has been pretty down of late.
Yeah, and of course, she recently said that, we have to destroy capitalism. Well, count me out, right? I mean, if that's her approach, there's a lot of people who might otherwise care about reducing CO2 emissions and reducing the risk of climate change who are going to say, if that's your plan, then I'm not going to be any part of it because, capitalism brings prosperity, brings happiness, brings opportunity to people. It is the most powerful tool in history to improve the prosperity of people, not just in the United States, but across the globe. And if your solution is to create widespread misery, then what's the point? And that, I think, is the problem. That is why lots of conservatives say, to hell with this. I don't want to, if this is what fighting climate change means, I don't care about climate change. We can't do that, right? We should, and it's not just climate change, it should be other environmental issues. There are solutions. We should offer our own solutions. Again, my book has so many examples because I think that there's a lot of abstract, well, if we use market forces, it's being done and it's more effective. And so that's my frustration with people like Greta Thunberg is that you might agree that their extremism is making it hard to solve the environmental problems they claim to care about. There are good solutions, but if your solution is destroy capitalism, you're actually destroying your own movement and should, frankly.
Yeah, and in her case, I just feel sorry for her because it's one of those cases where you've got a kid who is they're constantly being told they're wise beyond their years, missing a giant piece of the picture. And you can see on her face, she's a pretty, she seems internally miserable. And that makes me sad for any kid. Nancy says small approaches, whether in Washington or Sri Lanka, matter and add up to significant differences. We can make a difference in the price of gas collectively by eliminating unneeded trips here, there, and everywhere at a whim, although fossil fuels are endless. The Pope recently initiated a letter to all of the earth calling us for us to do small things. If you've not watched his YouTube movie to make us be more aware and make a commitment to do these small things, I encourage you to do so. If you're familiar with this, do you have any thoughts on his proclamation to all the earth's peoples and how we can promote it?
So I agree with the Pope's desire to tell people to care for the planet, to be a good steward of the planet. That is, rather than environmental protection, what I focus on is environmental stewardship. We have a response, and that assumes we have a responsibility to care for the planet. And where you see people doing that most is taking care of their local community, of the environment that is near them, which is why, to the extent possible, we should move decisions about environmental stewardship closest to the people who are on the ground, because you find that they take care of it. I did a series of videos about tribal stewardship of natural resources and pointed out what a good job they do of caring for reservation lands, because it matters a lot to them. The things they do, the mistakes they make, or the good things they do benefit and impact them. So I absolutely agree with the Pope's call to be stewards, to have that stewardship ethic. It is very important, and we see it all the time. Where I think that the Pope, and not just the Pope, but other religious organizations that weigh in on environmental issues is that they then take the next step and say, and therefore here are the policies, or here are the approaches we must do. And that I find many religious organizations are shockingly uninformed. So we used to go to a Methodist church. Just about every Sunday, the pastor would lecture us about environmental issues, and unfortunately, they knew almost nothing. One time, there was a Methodist statement that said, "We are in danger of peak energy, running out of coal, and that's why we need to shift off of coal, because we're going to run out of coal and run out of energy." The opposite is true. We have a ton of coal. We have more coal than we know what to do with, right? That's the problem. Is not that we're going to run out of coal. It's that we have so much coal, we can keep using it for a very long time. And the concern is that if we keep using it, that's how we do environmental damage. And yet the Methodist Church said the exact opposite. That's the problem I have. I totally agree with the moral call to be good stewards of the planet. I think sometimes those folks become arrogant and believe that because they have the moral authority, that they also know what they're talking about in terms of policy. And very frequently, they really don't.
Next question's from Tom. What's the cost data on picking up plastic on the beach versus a mid-Pacific effort to recapture plastic?
Well, they're two different problems. So I don't want to compare them. They're not. It's not apples to apples, right? Stopping plastic from getting in the ocean is going to be cheaper and easier than going and collecting plastic that is in the ocean. Okay, so I don't want to make those competitive. My goal in telling that anecdote is simply to say, people underestimate the power of lots of small actions. And they think that that big problems require big solutions. It's called proportionality bias. So that's what you think, right? Is you think it's a big problem, we need a big solution. That's why we still look to the EPA and things like the Clean Air Act to impose these big government solutions on these problems, because we think that the solution has to be proportional. In fact, that's simply not the case. So it's going to be more expensive for some time, and maybe forever, to try to pull out of the ocean the plastic that has been put in. But if you are going to if you have limited money, which of course we always have limited resources, and you were going to choose, should we pull plastic out of the ocean, or should we stop 10 times as much plastic from getting in the ocean in the first place? You probably would want to spend the money on stopping plastic from getting into the ocean in the first place and turning off the spigot, rather than spending a lot of money to have very little benefit to the ocean.
It is funny how the phenomenon that you reference where, and it applies in different areas as well. People sometimes they have a speech and they've got, 10 minutes of content, but they don't feel like they're really delivering a speech until they deliver a half hour or an hour. Now there's a lot of filler there because that's the big speech, and they forget, brevity can be the soul of wit, so to speak. It reminded me of the classic Bob Newhart skit where he becomes the psychologist for $5. I don't know if you've ever seen that, Todd, but everybody who walks up to him has all kinds of horrible problems, and they ask him what they should do. And he says, "Are you ready? I just need the $5 in advance." And then he says, "Stop it. just stop doing it.
Yes.
If you follow this advice, your life is going to change." Anyway, good stuff. Next question's from Vicky. Oh, it's mainly a shameless plug compliment for you, Todd. Vicky Malloy says, "Thank you, Todd, for the amazing presentation." Yeah, I mean, this is Todd needs this. Amazing presentation at the Chelan Douglas County Republican Women. You stirred up significant interest and empowered us to view environmental issues from how we can affect change from a common sense, incentivized perspective to take action. So another satisfied customer of the Time to Think Small book approach. Tom Osborne now as this: "I've been to Egypt, and people in the smaller towns dump all of their waste into the canals. Tons of plastic and human waste. Love the plastic bank idea." Now, this is exactly the kind of situation you were referring to before, that they're cleaning up and doing so, and giving people a profit, and then using some of this to turn it into some other useful product, right, Todd?
That's exactly right. And so collecting plastic, turning it into something valuable is critical. And that, again, so what technology does is it allows those market forces to work in a way that they might not have previously, right? If you tried to do this 20 years ago, before there were smartphones, it would have been much more difficult to coordinate, to pay people to have the kind of effect that you have now. Now they can do that very effectively because the barriers to communication, the barriers to organization are so low because technology makes them so low. I'll give you another example, actually in Africa, of ways that people are using small technologies to reduce plastic waste. So in many African countries and rural African villages, the way that people get water is that women, predominantly women, walk to the local river or stream up to a mile or more away, collect water, and then bring it back. But they don't always know that water is clean, right? It can be contaminated. There can be worms, all sorts of things like that. So the way that they get clean water is basically one of two ways. Take that water that they've collected and they can boil it. The number one cause of deforestation in Africa is cutting down trees to make charcoal and cook food and boil water. So by doing that, not only is it arduous, not only is it time consuming, it also contributes to deforestation. The other way that they get clean water is that they buy plastic bags of water. Well, if you don't have access to clean water, you probably don't have access to good garbage collections. So what do you do with all those plastic bags? Well, they get thrown away, and whether they make it into the water or not, they are a waste that lay around. So a group called E-Water Services, and it's a group of folks who used to work for the United Nations and do water projects, decided to try to create pumps that were reliable. Pumps that are installed by governments or NGOs, often about half of them, not quite half of them, break within 18 months. And to get them fixed, you often don't have experts there. The government may not come for a while. The NGO may be gone, may not be coming back. So you don't have people who can fix it. So what E-Water Services did is they said, you know what, we need to use technology that's now available and create a market incentive to make sure they work. So they installed internet-connected pumps that interestingly use Amazon Web Services, so they have a connection to Washington State, but they use AWS and they're internet connected. And so people pay about a penny a day. They get a little key fob, they walk up to the water pump, the water comes out, they're charged by how much water they use, so there is an incentive to conserve and use only as much as you need. And then there's a revenue stream. So when one of the pump breaks, somebody's losing money. They have partners in the area whose revenue is dependent on all of those pumps working. And so when one breaks, They are immediately told because it's internet connected, and then they go and figure out what the problem is and fix it. So as I said, oftentimes it would take months for these pumps to be fixed. Now it takes about a day. And you can actually go to e-water services webpage and you can see on there that 98% of their pumps are working at any given time. So now if you are, a woman in one of those villages, rather than having to spend a lot of your day hiking to get water and not being sure if it's going to be clean, you can simply go to a pump that's reliable anytime during the day, get your water, and then do other productive things, whether that is doing another job, raising your children, educating your children. All of those opportunities are created simply by having that reliable pump, and it reduces the need to cut down trees, and it reduces the need for plastic waste. Something as simple as an internet connected pump makes all of those things possible. And they have served more than 250,000 people now as a result of this. So it's really powerful. And again, it's just another example of small, simple technology having a big impact.
I'll also add that those heights for water are frequently, that's a likelihood of crime, attacks, physical violence, sexual assaults, other things that happen to women and trying to go get that water. So, those pumps are important in all kinds of ways. So it's an amazing, really incredible company that you're talking about there. But speaking of, that's one of the things I was curious, because I know you've known about a lot of these little micro approaches to dealing with the environment, but in researching for your book, it doesn't have to be the most effective, but was there an example that you came across that you had no idea about before, that you saw that really sticks out with you as, the most impressive, or the most, it basically made you catch your breath as far as, hey, this is just amazing. I'd never thought of it, didn't see it coming, and I had no idea this was happening. Is there an example like that you can point to?
There's a lot of those, some of which I have already told.
Yeah. Just the one that sticks out for you. I mean, if there was one and you just had to make it one, what would that be?
The e-water services is one of my favorite, but I'll tell you the one that I started with and that sort of got me down this path. So it is a group called Paso Pacifico, based in Los Angeles, that works in Central America and works to fight poaching of turtle eggs, because many sea turtles are endangered. And one of the big reasons is that people poach the eggs to sell or to eat. And so the question is, how do you do that? So Paso Pacifico had a cool system where they would pay people in those communities to go to the poachers and tell them, look, you know what you're doing, and this is having an impact, and they made good progress. And in fact, some of the poachers would say, okay, these eggs are from endangered turtle. Here, I'll give half to you, but I'm going to keep these because I need to make a living, because I don't make any money, and this is how I make my money. But they could only work where they were effective. And the other thing is, they worked in places like Nicaragua, where there's not a lot of laws and the government is not reliable. And in fact, they had rangers, they had soldiers who with AK-47s who were supposed to be there to protect the turtle eggs, but they were just bribed. And in fact, some of those bribes went up the chain to government. So government had an interest in some cases, had a part of poaching. So how do you fight in that circumstance where government is actually against you, where people are starving and need that revenue? So what they did is they were watching Breaking Bad, and they saw an episode where somebody put a tracker, and they were like, what if we put a tracker so that we could figure out the poaching network, not the person on the ground, but who's paying the person on the ground? That's where we need to go. So they took a 3D printer and they printed a small turtle egg, a fake turtle egg, and put a little tracker inside that uses the cell phones, in order so that when the poacher came and collected a whole clutch of eggs, they wouldn't notice that it was in there, and then they could track them and disentangle the poaching networks and catch people, not just the poachers, but people who were trafficking the eggs. And I just thought that was really incredible, because somebody told me about it. And I made a joke that said, so basically, small technology is more powerful than AK-47s when it comes to protecting turtles. And they said, yes, that's right. And that just sort of little joke that I made sort of got my mind thinking about the power of very simple technologies that are accessible to everybody. They used a 3D printer. They put a cell phone tracker in there. And yet it is more effective than soldiers with AK-47s when it comes to protecting sea turtles. So that's what got me sort of launched on this and made me excited about the opportunity of these. And then once I started looking, I saw these things everywhere. And I just thought that was really cool.
Let me add, you've also admitted.
By the way, if you want to support one of these technologies, give money to Pasta Pacifico. They are a really wonderful organization, and I've gotten to know them in this process, and they deserve your support and help. So I will just make that little pitch.
You've also admitted now that watching TV can save the world. So, if
the right TV programs.
All right, kids, good TV is good for your brain. Watch as much as you can. Real quick question based on a chapter title that you have, a chapter that I've not seen yet, which is what do the Flint water crisis and the Thomas Edison have in common? I'm wondering if you'll, spoiler alert, but I'm wondering if you'll elaborate on that for us.
The simple answer is local empowerment. So when I talk, and this on the speech I gave to the Chelan Republican women yesterday, I start with the Flint water crisis, because one of the things that I think we have to emphasize is not just that these ideas work, because like I've given you all examples of how small technologies combined with local incentives work, but that the alternatives don't. That our assumption that government programs will solve these problems is a false assumption. It is a false hope. And yet that is typically when people say, oh, well, we've passed this program to solve this problem, therefore it's solved. No, it's not solved. And the Flint water crisis is a perfect example. So people are familiar with the Flint water crisis. The city changed the source of its water. The new water was corroding the inside of the pipes. So people were getting rust, they were getting lead. I mean, they were holding up bottles of water that were brown for their drinking water. And so it was unsafe, not only to drink, but to use and shower and wash and things like that. But the state government denied the problem for a long time. And there was actually a quote that I have in my book. It says, anyone concerned about the health of the water in Flint can calm down, which wasn't true. And then finally, when they realized that there was a problem, the regional EPA office was trying to figure out what to do with it. And so they said, well, maybe we can give people water filters or something like that. And they had this pot of money, and they said, well, this pot of money is not really for this, but we could probably justify using it to give people water filters to make their water clean. And there was a response from one of the directors in the regional EPA office that said, we could probably justify it, but I'm not sure Flint is the kind of community we want to go out on a limb for. So if you think the EPA is looking out for you, you need to think twice. I work with government. I have a lot of respect for people who work in government, but putting faith in them that they will always get it right obviously is wrong. And the Flint water crisis is a very dramatic example of where there were failures at basically all levels of government. So what's the alternative? The alternative is local control. Give people power over energy, over clean water, over things like that. And that's the connection to Thomas Edison, is that giving people local control so that they just make the decisions about those key environmental issues is more likely to be effective because they have their own interests at heart. And I tell a story that there is a thing called a microgrid where people are producing their own electricity and sharing it amongst themselves in Brooklyn, just miles away from where Thomas Edison created the first power station that basically did the exact same thing. Which is remarkable to think that we now have the technology, individuals now have the technology to be a utility in the same way that Thomas Edison was.
That is really cool. From David Preston, I just ordered the book. We need to see a lot more of those comments, by the way. That's good. Thanks, David. Tom Osborne says he loves the small solutions. Rotary International has a small efficient stove that reduces wood fuel harvest, labor use, smoke, and improves health, made by local labor. look at stoveteam.org. Have you heard of them? I seem to have. I've heard of stoves like this before. Really fascinating.
Yeah, there are lots of different projects like this. I think that's a cool one. I'm a Rotarian, so yes, I've heard of that one. But again, it's the goal is to create small local technologies that take advantage of local circumstances, and I think that's a good example.
I love the term Rotarian. I mean, I know it refers to the Rotary, but it sounds like a Protestant church that has dissolved and split off into multiples. It's just kind of rotating through. You know, you can tell my evangelical experience. Let's see. Idri Geiger says, encourage the companies that collect business and household waste in each community. My HOA has done this for multifamily and now have all kinds of items being recycled. As is or as raw materials for new items. Working Small is also working with agencies, companies that can do this. That's a cool idea.
Yeah, I think, again, if one of the beauties of the technology is that it allows small groups of people to do what previously was inefficient or just couldn't work. And so little projects like that, I think now are possible, whereas 20 and 30 years ago they simply weren't.
Can you comment on the mandate to use heat pumps and the related phasing out of natural gas as a power source for home appliances and HVAC equipment?
Yeah, so I mentioned this a little bit earlier. We last week, the State Building Code Council, which is an unelected body that sets building codes, required heat pumps, electric heat pumps, to provide space heating for all new residential construction. There is some allowance for natural gas to provide backup heating when it gets below a certain temperature, but the cost of having natural gas and only using it when it gets below certain temperatures is very expensive. So it's I think they're going to see a lot of cases where they simply don't put in the natural gas, which is of course their goal. They don't want natural gas. The original proposal was to ban it altogether. So this seems like a concession when it really isn't. But they did an independent analysis, economic analysis, from the Pacific Northwest National Labs, which is the national laboratory in the Tri-Cities. And Pacific Northwest National Labs said that the life cycle cost, including energy efficiency, would increase the cost by about $6,000. So it costs more than it saves. There's a lot of claims it's like, oh no, you make it up on energy savings. PNNL said, nope, this costs more than it saves. But again, the goal of the requirement to stop using natural gas, we already have a law that does this. The cap covers natural gas. So we have a law that says you have to reduce CO2 emissions from natural gas. Nominally, the cap system says, we don't care how you do it, you just have to do it. But then politicians can't help themselves and they say, no, we want you to meet that, and here's how we want to do it. Even if this is a super expensive way to do it, we just want you to do it this way. And that, I think, is the fundamental problem, is that they just keep duplicating the same laws on top of each other. Each new law costs more, but it doesn't add anything more to environmental benefits. And there are far better ways to help people reduce their energy use and CO2 emissions that are less expensive.
Well, Todd, I know this has been a really exciting experience for you with the successful launch. There's been national attention, and national media outlets have expressed interest in Time to Think Small, and we look forward to seeing you on the circuit, so to speak, and the book to continue to be a success. We'll of course post this episode, a special episode of Washington Policy on the Go, online, and you can share it with friends. And I wanted to say, you've made some more work for yourself with this, because when you talked about how great this book would be in terms of giving it to young people, especially college students, because there's all these stories about how to talk to Uncle Eddie at the dinner table at Thanksgiving.
Todd.
Now Todd needs the column that says how to talk to college students, how to talk to your younger relatives, your nephew and nieces, at Thanksgiving, thanks to this How to Think Small, when it comes to talking about the environment. So now you've got your own column assignment, and the book's doing really well. I'll close it with Cindy Jacobson's comment. I also just ordered the book, which is a good sign that people enjoyed the talk. So thanks a lot, Todd. As always, I think it's a fantastic accomplishment, and we'll see everybody else next week and then every other week on Washington Policy on the Go. Thanks again for joining us, everybody.